How's it going, everyone? Nick here with HN Entertainment's review for Venom, the anticipated Marvel spin-off focusing on one of Spider-Man's greatest villains. This one developed by Sony though, without the hand of Marvel Studios. So obviously Venom has had a very long wait getting his own solo movie, because Avi Arad has been trying to get this made since 2007, which is one of the reasons that he was jammed into Spider-Man 3. So now we have a Venom movie, starring Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock in Venom, directed by Zombieland's Ruben Fleischer, starring Michelle Williams, Riz Ahmed, Jenny Slate, Reed Scott, and others. So my first impressions of the movie were that it was bad, but not quite as bad as some of the reactions were making it out to be. We recently covered the reactions coming out of the premiere and some of the first press screenings from last week, and they were pretty bad. Some of them were comparing this film to Catwoman or Affleck's Daredevil or Ang Lee's Hulk, which I personally don't think is that bad of a film either, but that's besides the point. So this film, yes, it's bad, it feels dated, there are definitely issues with it, but it honestly isn't that awful overall. It's actually kind of a fun time at the movies. I certainly enjoyed it more than The Predator, which recently came out, which fans of the channel will know that I'm a really big fan of the Predator franchise, and this actually left me more satisfied. So in the film, we follow a version of Eddie Brock's story bonding with Venom that doesn't include Spider-Man. Essentially, Carlton Drake of the Life Foundation has been trying to figure out how to evolve the next step of humanity. How are we going to get into the stars? According to him, we only have one more generation left on Earth before the planet is completely wiped dry and becomes uninhabitable. He makes a scientific breakthrough when his probe actually comes into contact with the symbiotes, presumably from the planet Clintar. This spawns a chain of events that involve several symbiotes, including Scream, Riot, and Venom. Once Carlton Drake and Eddie are both possessed by separate symbiotes, they are both working towards different goals. Essentially, Venom wants to actually stay on Earth because it's getting used to Eddie Brock and humans, while Carlton Drake believes that once bonded with Riot, that the next step is to actually bring all of the symbiotes, the millions that they left behind, to Earth so they can invade and take over the planet. So it's up to Eddie and Venom to stop them, along with help from Michelle Williams and other characters. So speaking of the characters themselves, easily the strongest character in this movie is Eddie Brock himself and Venom. Even though we are left with a lot of questions about Eddie's past and his character overall, I kind of wish that they had leaned more into him being more of a scumbag and kind of an anti-hero and a very morally gray character, because that's kind of the Eddie Brock that I knew from the comics and, animated shows and things like that. He's a character that will essentially do anything to get a big story or a big scoop. And in this movie, he technically does, but he doesn't really go that far. It's not like we actually hate him before he's redeemed with Venom. So that was one of the negatives. The other negatives that I had regarding the characters is that the villain is actually very underdeveloped. Carlton Drake, we don't really know a lot about his motivations either, and I guess the only other supporting character that I actually did like was Michelle Williams' Anne Wang. I actually thought that her performance was good, although she didn't have quite as much chemistry as I would have liked to have a believable relationship with Eddie Brock. Going back to one of the positives I had with the film, Eddie Brock and Venom's relationship is obviously the highlight, because Venom is the titular character and we want to see how they actually portray him in this film, especially after he did have a live action appearance in Spider-Man 3, which was essentially awful. So their relationship is more of a Jekyll and Hyde. They're definitely working towards different things when they first bond together and meet, but over the time they learn to accept each other because that's the only way they're going to survive. There's definitely stuff that could be interesting should this film be a success and they actually move on to further sequels. There's a lot that you can mine from their relationship for further character development. Personally, I think it was a bad decision to go with some of the lesser symbiotes like Riot and Scream for this movie. I think that it probably would have been better had they just done Carnage as the only other symbiotes, because the villains in this film feel more like lackeys than an actual threat. There's no real sense of danger anywhere in this film because Venom is just so powerful. Overall, my final thoughts, this is a fun but flawed film. Very flawed, actually, because it's clear that a lot of this was probably chopped out in the editing bay. It also feels like this should have been a rated R movie, even though it mostly works as PG-13. It just feels like it's lacking a lot of teeth and doesn't really get to shine where it could have had it been rated R. Overall, I'm going to give Venom a 6 out of 10, and I'd say it's worth checking out if you are a very hardcore Venom fan, but if not, it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill superhero movie that you've probably seen before. for several times. But I also think that if this should get a sequel, like I said, there could be some really interesting material in there to mine from. So that's our review for Venom. Drop your thoughts down in the comments below if you guys got a chance to check the film out yourself, but please keep this one spoiler free as we might have a separate spoiler discussion coming in the later days. For more updates on Venom, Sony's Marvel Universe, and everything pop culture, be sure to subscribe to HN Entertainment.